Holy sweet Moses, we made it through another off season. The Utah Jazz are back in their practice facility. They're wearing jazz colored shirts and shorts and headbands and armbands and all kinds of bands. They're back to getting ready for the 2025-2026 season, which is what we thought we should do as well. So Mark Pereira and Dan Clayton are back with you on another Salt City Hoops podcast to break down, I don't know, a kind of interesting media day, I guess, Mark. First of all, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and the number one thing I'm taking back from your intro there is that Utah Jazz colors mean something again. When you say that the Jazz are wearing Jazz colors, that usually that's a big mystery. If you're watching this on the YouTube feed, you see I have various different posters and things of the different Jazz eras represented. I do not have any black and yellow available for this. But Jazz colors means purple. We saw in Media Day, the preview stuff, that all this stuff you'll see on interstitial videos in the arena and everything, it's going to be in their new white uniforms, and that'll be pretty great. So I'm just happy Jazz colors mean something again.
I mean, purple is back, is what I've heard a couple times now.
For a few years, purple is back, but I think it's now a permanent change. I am great. I think when it comes to Media Day, we all know there's going to be a lot of platitudes spoken, but the Jazz have a few things that are worth talking about. Or the characters involved are going to be presenting some comments that are not just going to be your fluff muscle watch I put on 15 pounds of muscle. I think there are some wildly interesting new characters, both rookies and veterans alike. I think Jazz fans are lucky that our head coach is very long in the tongue on giving very intelligent, long answers to simple questions. I think the purpose of Will Hardy's comments is something that can be psychoanalyzed, but he's going to give you a lot of honest feedback. This is Austin Ainge's first media day as a GM, kind of poking holes in some of the things he said. So this is just like before we see some preseason games, or Dan, you and me or somebody else, we're going to do some Salt City Hoops player previews. But we want to poke at just some individual things people have said, because I don't think it was just platitudes and nonsense. I was pretty intrigued by a few things.
Well, I'll get this out of the way right now. The rumors are true. I have put on 15 pounds. The rumors, however, are a little misguided in that it's not muscle. So we'll just deal with that right off the. That's mostly a joke. I mean, it's. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think media day is what it is, and we've all been doing this long enough to recognize. A polite answer perhaps. But there were some impolite answers too. There were some answers that made you go like, oh, wow, I didn't know Walker Kessler was going to respond that way when asked about his lack of rookie contract extension. And Austin Ainge said some things, and, Ryan Smith, I thought made some interesting remarks just talking about the structure of the front office. So yeah, let's just jump in. Where do you want to go first? What was to you kind of the most eyebrow raising thing that you heard on Monday's content day?
I think the number one topic that I think both Austin Ainge and Will Hardy got into, which is just something that I think Jazz fans at large are itching at, is, and was a hot topic during the Ty Corbin era, is simply how are you going to break down minutes here? Because in the past, and like we take last year and the year before, for instance, you didn't have enough young players to really fill out an entire rotation. Like, you needed to have some veterans playing, and of course you had Lauri Markkanen on the team, but with players at the quality of Colin Sexton and John Collins, again, I'm not going to relitigate whether to bring in John Collins or not. You can read our thoughts on that at several other places. But those are players who are worth playing, and teaching Keontae George and Walker Kessler, those kind of young players, how to play NBA basketball. But those players are also like, hey, you can't really bench them ever. Like, you can kind of get them on board with setting out a fourth quarter or setting out a second half or something like that as you're doing some weird tanky mechanics. But the Jazz adding significant amount of new young players, right, with 3 rookies, two very highly regarded rookies. Not to disrespect John Tonje too much, but he's also a late second round pick. And that's the first players mentioned today is John Tonje. Congratulations. The first rookie mentioned before Ace Bailey or Walt Clayton. So the algorithm will pick that up that this is a John Tonje podcast. But when you bring in instead Yusuf Nurkic, Kevin Love, and Kyle Anderson, these are still, and George Niang, of course, these are still players that are command rotation minutes on bad basketball teams, but they also aren't good enough that you can't tell them you're going to have to sit down, especially because they were acquired via their salary amounts that they make, and it worked for math reasons rather than, hey, we traded for you because we want you on the team. So you have to ask, and the media did, all the various beat reporters that we are very blessed to have a great quality and quantity of. They poked at Austin Ainge and Will Hardy. How are you going to break down minutes? Because Will Hardy's whole shtick the past few years is, well, you got to earn these minutes. Well, I don't think that was really true over the past couple of years. You saw a lot of players who did not earn minutes playing a lot of minutes because you were able to convince John Collins that his pinky toe had a hangnail and he should probably sit out for a month. There's probably more legitimate injuries than that, and the guys aren't going to complain too much. I'm cashing a huge paycheck on a losing basketball team. I'll see what happens next year. But they are competitors; they want to play. But there were a lot of players who weren't getting who were getting a lot of time who didn't quite deserve it. So it begs the question, and this is a very, very long intro, and I apologize. I think Austin Ainge and Will Hardy had more honesty to their answer where they said there is actually enough young players kind of filtering out this roster that you aren't going to be replaced by a John Collins. You might be replaced by the other young guy in your position. And players like Kevin Love and George Niang, Kyle Anderson, and Yusuf Nurkic, they're all long in the tooth a little bit. Like, they're not... I'm sure they'll sit there and say, we'd love to play 35 minutes, but if you just need to spot Kevin Love 6 minutes because the front court isn't figuring out something that they need to have figured out a long time ago, that might happen, but you don't feel pressure to play them 20, 25 minutes like you would a John Collins type. So I thought that the answers, and we can get into the specific quotes if you want, that they were giving about they need to actually compete and perform. And that's going to be the differentiator on whether you're getting minutes or not. And I think Jazz fans got to be ready for 17-minute Ace Bailey nights, right? And that sort of thing.
Yeah. And I guess we'll see, rebuilding teams say that a lot, including last year when John Collins was still on the roster and Jordan Clarkson was still on the roster and Colin Sexton was still on the roster. I guess the proof is in the pudding, and we'll see soon how much that is kind of the fall platitude and how much of it is real, but just structurally real quick. Let's talk about how this roster is composed. There's Lauri Markkanen, kind of in a category of his own, right? The only player on this team who is like a veteran, but not like a journeyman, I'm here to have a cup of coffee kind of veteran. Then you've got literally nine, and this is just on the regular roster. This doesn't even count your John Tonjes or your Elijah Harklesses or your Oscar Tshiebwes or whatever. You have 9 guys who are in their first 4 seasons in the NBA and are recent draftees. And then the rest of the regular roster are these 5 guys with between 7 and 17 years of experience. 7 is Svi Mykhailiuk. 17 is Kevin Love, who, I think various of them probably expect to play some. I was actually a little bit surprised at how little Kyle Anderson played last year. I don't think he really fell off a cliff in terms of ability. I think he's got a weird skill set. He makes more sense in some contexts than others. George Niang obviously expects to be able to play, has some NBA skill sets. Svi Mykhailiuk, we mostly saw him play kind of spiritual point guard minutes last year in a reserve role for the Jazz. And then who am I missing before I go to Kevin Love? I'm missing Nurkic. One guy. Yusuf Nurkic. Yeah, I don't know that I need to.
I think we want to forget Yusuf Nurkic sometimes.
Right. And then there's Kevin Love. And that's why, to me, one of the most interesting quotes of yesterday We're recording this on Tuesday, obviously. One of the most interesting quotes for me was hearing Kevin Love say, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, "Yeah, I can contribute whether I'm on the court or not." And I didn't expect to hear that from a guy who is at the age he's at, meaning he only has a certain number of years left, a certain number of games left, a certain number of practices left in his career. But he's also like kind of vaguely still a winning player. Like last year, he was a value add by most advanced metrics, a modest value add, but like he's someone who could, lowercase letters help a team. And so I guess I was kind of surprised to hear him just kind of concede that he might be a towel waver and a merit badge counselor. But I think that's important. I think that shows that, Will Hardy joked that like, hey, there's finally someone on the team that's my age, which is hilarious because of how young Will Hardy is. Like you would think in most NBA locker rooms he'd not be waiting for someone to walk in who knew how to shave. But anyway, that's going to be a unique challenge for him just to see how he balances that. And I'm sure there will be times when these five guys play. But again, I thought it was interesting that Kevin Love was just like, hey, I'm all right. Like call me when you need me, coach. Although I do think that he and others on that list of five, I do think the Jazz will just keep their ear to the ground throughout the season. I think there's a good chance that if you were to say that the over-under is 1.5 on how many of those five guys are not on the Jazz at the end of the season, I would take the over on 1.5.
And I would take the over on that. Right? I think it would.
What if it's 2.5? Would you still take the over?
That's a better line. I think three of those guys feel like they're not long for the Jazz. Just to touch on that before I think about Kevin Love a little bit, it's interesting that these players are still of a pretty decent quality, though. Like they aren't all Svi Mikhailuk style. Like, is this their last NBA stop? Like there is some quality left in the tank here. So it is. They do have an expectation that, hey, if you want us to be the merit badge counselors that you think we can be, or stable presences, you got to give us some minutes. Like we have to play some sort of competent basketball here at some time. So I don't think they're going to be totally washed away. And with Kevin Love, I thought it was interesting that his honesty was very refreshing on this point. And I forget if it was Sarah or Andy who asked him like, hey, so when the Jazz traded for you, you probably weren't coming, right? And then he said, yeah, no, I was mulling my options, which is his way of saying, yeah, I probably wasn't coming. And then he pointed, like, I had a conversation with Austin Ainge and Will Hardy this summer. And I don't know much about Austin Ainge from press conferences and his vibe or whatever. I mean, we know a lot about Danny, who we didn't hear from at all yesterday, by the way. And it's not like Danny's not with the team anymore. But obviously Austin's running the show. But from what we hear from Will Hardy, I think Will Hardy he's already a top 3, 4, 5 coach of convincing, or of really speaking to player rhetoric and convincing individual players of their specific wants and desires and how we can help them. And I think the Austin Ainge side of this is what you were saying, like keeping your ear to the ground, is just saying, hey, Kevin, if you're a good soldier this year, like we're going to try to get you another title or get you some playoff minutes somewhere. Like please help us. And Will Hardy saying like, I really need some help. And if you need some minutes to help make that help worth it, like you're going to get it. Like I really do value you, instead of another situation, perhaps like Brooklyn or something where I can't speak exactly to Jordy Fernandez's style or anything like that. But I really do feel like if you're in Brooklyn, there's nothing happening there. Like they don't have a Lauri Markkanen who has a prior relationship with Kevin Love. They don't have barely any veterans on that squad that are worth kind of having some sort of team building around. I think there is value that Will Hardy was able to convince Kevin Love to participate in. And so Kevin Love ended up having one of the longest interviews of the day, of Media Day. Yeah. And his candor.
And led off.
I'm sorry?
And led off.
Yeah, it was refreshing and cool, and he's going to be he has a Park City connection, and I I think I am more excited to see Kevin Love perhaps even on the court a few times this year than I was before. I'm not upset at him deciding to show up.
Yeah. Well, and just to further kind of, and then we can move on because I don't think people necessarily are like, I want to know what Dan and Mark think about Kevin Love specifically. Although he is kind of a hot name this week for reasons we've detailed. But just to the ear to the ground comment, like here's what I would assume, and this is unsourced. I'm not reporting anything. I would assume that if Kevin Love had a guaranteed minimum offer and had come to the Jazz and said, "Hey, I've got an offer from the Lakers or the Clippers or Milwaukee or whoever at the minimum. So just I'll take the minimum salary kind of buyout reduction and I'll go on my way and everybody wins." I bet the Jazz take that deal. In other words, I think the fact that Kevin Love got to September 29th and was still an on-paper member of the Utah Jazz probably means that teams aren't 100% sure right now that they want to guarantee, that they want to put $2.3 million, which is the subsidized portion of the veteran minimum, next to Kevin's name on their cap sheet. And that might be different in a couple of months when it's prorated and it's only $1.5 million, or it might be different in a couple months when Kevin Love, has had a couple of games where he shot, 4 for 5 from 3 in limited minutes or whatever. So,
or a team fighting to get out of the play. This is what I think is the most likely qualitative scenario. A team who is fighting to get out of play-in contention and into full capital P playoffs. They suffer a key front court injury or something like that,
right.
And they need to rack up some wins in February and March. And they say, please, we will give you a second round pick for Kevin Love or something like that, because we could really, or some sort of situation that makes it worthwhile for the Jazz, right? That teams don't like being in the play-in, and front court depth can be a tricky thing.
Yeah, so that's true for Kevin, and I think same thing. Like if you wind up having an opportunity to pounce on a trade mid-season, like Slow-Mo's salary is kind of helpful. Like it's kind of nice to have salaries in that range that are above the minimum, but they're still 7-figure salaries. Same with Kevin Love. In other words, I think that for all of these guys, whether it's because someone reaches out on the down low and says, "Hey, if you got out of your contract with the Jazz, you might have an offer show up at your door for the minimum for the rest of the season," or because the math works at some point in a trade or whatever. Ken Clayton's favorite fake trade for Kevin Love was like Love and a small salary for Gabe Vincent to the Lakers, and his logic was just that Kevin Love wouldn't be that important to the Lakers, neither's Gabe Vincent, but Kevin Love is much cheaper, so it saves them a bunch of tax money. Like that's a possibility too. So
and Gabe Vincent would absolutely play on this Jazz team tomorrow, like a defense neutral, but at times defense positive point guard. That's an interesting fake trade. Like that Gabe Vincent is a player who would belong in Utah, but we'll see. I like fake trades.
That's true, and yet I also don't even think they'd necessarily be doing it for Gabe Vincent. They do it for like a second round swap, or I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, so that's why I say that of these 5 guys, not all of these 5 guys are showing up to locker clean out day in Salt Lake City in April. Some stuff is going to happen, and that's okay.
In April, Dan, are you saying this team isn't making the playoffs?
Oh, sorry. I meant June.
Thank you. But yeah, to your point, there's a lot of talk about the veterans and playing time, and I think the Austin Ainge, Will Hardy, Kevin Love comments they all kind of gel together. There was an incisive question about, hey, you have a to Austin Ainge, you have a top 8 protected pick. You're going to be focused on that, right? Like you're not losing that pick. Let's be clear for Jazz fans, it would be organizational malpractice for a team as bad as the Jazz to lose that pick. If they got incredibly unlucky where they finished with the sixth worst record and got jumped by 3 teams into the lottery, them's the breaks. Okay, we can't be mad about the Derek Favors salary dump forever if you get jumped by 3 teams. But if they are sitting at the 7th or 8th worst record, coming into March, they sure as shit are going to tank to make sure that is not a significant risk. But it was an incisive comment to Austin, and he just totally said, don't care about the pick. We're here to compete, right? And I think that's a fair diplomatic answer. The point of getting rid of John Collins and Colin Sexton is so that the veterans you replace them with are incapable of winning. And if Yusuf Nurkic and Kyle Anderson carry this team to 43 wins, and as something you always like to say, that means that a whole lot of other things went super, super right for the young players that we are hoping become all-stars. Like a 43-win Jazz team, or even like the 10th worst record in the NBA, requires some very cool things to have happened to this team this year. And I don't know if it's worth giving up a top 8 pick for, but it'll show some different things. So Austin Ainge was directly asked about that, and I just want to point that out before some of our other we'll talk about players and individuals under the age of 37 now.
Yeah, I felt like he hedged a little bit and was like, hey, we know where we're at as a franchise. He also said that phrase or something very close to it in his answer. So, there's a certain way that he has to answer that question to avoid a big NBA fine. But yeah, I mean, I think everybody knows that the Jazz probably have one more, if everything goes right, one more kind of hold your nose type of season before they really start to think about, climbing the ladder. Which then I think leads into, and maybe we'll just go there because I know you want to talk about this and I want to talk about this. And it's maybe the single most interesting thing Austin Ainge said at Media Day was when he was asked directly about Lauri Markkanen trade rumors. And he was even more definitive on that and basically said, LOL Zach Lowe, which is kind of similar to something you wrote, Mark Pereira.
Yeah, they said, I want to apologize if it was Sarah or Andy or whoever the one of our wonderful reporters who asked the question. I think it might have been Sarah.
That one was Andy.
Sarah asked, that's right, Sarah asked Lauri about it, and then you're right, Andy did ask Austin. And Austin said, paraphrasing here, but pretty directly, that he is friends with Zach Lowe, but Zach Lowe missed the mark. When Zach Lowe said the phrase, this is a direct quote, Zach Lowe said, I can't imagine a scenario where Lauri Markkanen is on the Jazz at this time next year. And Austin Ainge was just completely refuted that. And as I wrote, which I encourage you all to read at Salt City Hoops, we don't have to recap the whole thing right now, a lot of non-Jazz people are going to look at the Utah Jazz and say, there's no reason for Lauri Markkanen to be there. Lauri doesn't want to be there, and there's no reason for a rebuilding team to have a 28-year-old all-star. I can definitely see a world where the Utah Jazz could use a 28-year-old all-star, and that is when these young players start showing net positive winning capabilities. Well, you're going to need an all-star from somewhere to make this a playoff team. Sure, it's a lot easier to do that if you already had Lauri Markkanen on the roster, so long as he's happy and paid, right? And so Lauri Markkanen is happy and paid and wants to be here. If he gets pissed off next summer or the season after that, we'll get there when we get there. But right now, he is bought into the plan. I think, again, huge credit to Will Hardy for a lot of this. Huge credit to the Jazz organization being a place where someone of Lauri Markkanen's personality likes to be. And from there, there's no reason to switch from a non-Lauri team or switch to being a Lauri Markkanen team to a non-Lauri Markkanen team, because whatever draft picks you're getting, you are hoping that they could be as good as Lauri Markkanen in 5 to 6 years, right? This isn't something where you get because you're trading in to ostensibly to a good basketball team. A bad basketball team is not trading for Lauri Markkanen. So you get a couple middling mid-round, first-round draft picks. Even the top echelon of what that could look like, a Giannis, a Kawhi Leonard, players who were drafted in the mid-first round, took them a few years to be quality players. And so do those players match up with the Ace Bailey timeline, right? And all of a sudden it's a little awkward. So if the young players on the team right now, of those 9 players you mentioned, if those become quality NBA starters, you don't even have to say all-star, just they're all net positive players. This is a 42-win team with Lauri Markkanen. You bump it up a little bit better. The young players get a little better, a little better, a little better. This is a 45, 48. All of a sudden, you're making a key free agent move. You're making a key trade. You're consolidating some young players. There's no reason to get rid of Lauri Markkanen. And Austin Ainge didn't talk about the strategy of that like I kind of dove into. But he was quite emphatic that it is not a... There's no trade market right now for Lauri Markkanen, so stop asking.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing. The Lauri conversation, the Walker Kessler conversation, which I'm sure we're going to have at some point in this podcast, it all comes back to the question about, do you think the Jazz are 5 years away or 2 years away or 1 year away or 7 years away or 3 years away, right? And we don't know, but obviously the Jazz have a pretty good chance of putting themselves in a position to draft another high draft pick next year. We all know they don't control that outcome. They can go 0-82 and they'll still have a 50-50 chance of dropping to fifth like they did this last year. By the way, at fifth, they got a pretty good player who at one point was considered a consensus top 2, top 3 pick in this draft, and fell for weird reasons. And, so
we are definitely gonna get into that on this show as well. I am so hyped about Ace Bailey.
So let's just say for a minute that Ace Bailey in his rookie season, that there's enough there that you start going, okay, I can see a floor, and he's at least a guy who's like going to reach the all-star level at some point in his career. Maybe, like perennial all-star, it's hard to tell as a rookie, but if you see the outlines of like a Rashard Lewis type, level of player, Rashard Lewis was a one-time all-star, or whatever. And then you've got a top 5 pick in next year's draft. I mean, you could have a top 5 pick in next year's draft, a draft that includes AJ DeBonta, who already chose to play in Utah once. You have Cam Boozer, whose dad is a Utah ex-All-Star. You've got Darren Peterson, who looks like he could be pretty special. No Utah ties, no obvious Utah ties, but like you've got some difference makers at the top of that draft. That's where you could start to see like that the Jazz could go into next offseason. And I know we're talking about this season, so we can dwell on this as much or as little as you want, Mark Pereira. But ostensibly, you could go into next season having identified that your next sort of star core is Lauri in his young 30s. By that point, Ace Bailey, once he's developed a little more, and one of these, Cam Boozer, AJ DeBonta, Darren Peterson. And then if Taylor Hendricks, if Keontae George, if Walt Clayton, if Bryce Sensabaugh, if Isaiah Collier, Kyle Filipowski, Cody Williams turns into something really special, if any of those
collectively decent, right? One of them could become special, but you can also do this in the aggregate of all those players just being okay. You can do a lot of things with that.
Or I guess more to my point, like if 2 of those 7 guys I just mentioned, not even counting Kessler, because to me Kessler has already kind of risen to like, hey, I'm starter level. I would get rotation minutes on most playoff teams is Walker Kessler's level at this point in the NBA. So he's kind of in his own thing. If of those other 7 guys, Hendricks, Williams, George, Clayton, Flip, Sensabaugh, Collier, if 2 or 3 of those guys are high level rotation players, like top 7 or 8 guys in a playoff rotation, then you're kind of cooking. And by the way, the Jazz, by doing this Kessler thing, by waiting on the Kessler thing, can also go into next season with $50 million in cap room and as many as 11 firsts to trade. So like this idea back to the Zach Lowe's and Michael Pinas of the world, and they're great. Like I love them. I love reading them, and I agree with what they write and say almost always. But this idea that the Jazz are just completely directionless and that there's no horizon at which Lauri Markkanen could possibly, fathom playing on a winning version of the Jazz team, I just think that's silly. Now, in the scenario I just spelled out, we use the word if a lot. Like a lot has to go right. And if Ace Bailey just looks okay, if the Jazz don't wind up with a top 3 pick in next year's draft, if most of the young guys are just kind of like whatever in their second and third seasons, um, then maybe Austin and Danny and Jay-Z and Will sit down and they decide like, shit, we need to do this again. We need to kick the can. We need another year's worth of high lottery talent. That's basically what happened last year. Like I will die. I will go to my grave believing that if the Jazz had drafted Cooper Flagg, they had scenarios in play to get more frisky this last offseason. And they didn't activate them because they didn't get Cooper Flagg and they didn't get Dylan Harper. And they still got a very talented young kid who, like I said, probably should have been a top 3 overall pick based on talent alone. And then he had a weird agent who messed up his process.
Not an agent.
And we'll get there. Yeah, sorry. Representative, family friend, manager, conciliere. So anyway, long way of saying there's a world in which, and I don't even want to call it a quick rebuild because, I mean, we're 3 years into this thing, right? Nothing about this has felt quick to those of us who, watch every dribble off the foot turnover by a rookie guard. But, there's a chance where there's a pathway to being to going, okay, we kind of know what the core of our team, what we want the core of our team to be in 2 to 3 years. So let's start, letting them try as hard as they can try.
Lauri was also,
that was a long one.
Yeah, Lauri was also emphatic that he likes being in Utah, like just straight up. So that's also out of it. Your point about if you think the Jazz are 2 years away, 3 years away, 5 years away, however many years away you think the Jazz are to being a playoff team, add 3 years onto that if you trade Lauri Markkanen. If you think they're
Correct.
2 years away, now they're 5 years away.
Conservatively.
Yeah. So I like to think that there is a more than 50% chance. As I wrote in my Lauri Markkanen piece, I think it's an above median chance, but I don't think it's unreasonable chance that this team is actually, we get some of those players to actually play a pretty great basketball together in 2 years. And if you still have Lauri Markkanen on the team, then that's a 42 to 45 win team that we're proud to go to home games for again. So,
And last thing I'll say here, because I know I'm soapboxing, and I know you want to talk about Walker Kessler and Ace Bailey and all
like
the
a good soapbox. That's what Salt City Hoops is for, man. The Salt City soapbox.
So you've written a great piece on why the Lauri Markkanen talk is overblown / silly / pick your adjective. Earlier this offseason, I wrote a similar one. Folks can find it. It was called On Timelines, Talent Bets, and Utah's Last Vet Standing. And in it, one of the things I break down is I look at the last 10 NBA finalists, and I look at the age distribution in their cores. And the thing that I found in doing that, and I kind of already knew it. This is why I decided to sit down and do this study, because I kind of knew what I would find. Like, if you look at title cores or finals-worthy cores, very rarely is like every player on that team 24, or is every player on that core 26. Like, OKC, the most recent title team, 22, 23, and 26. And that's actually kind of an outlier in terms of being more age-aligned than most title teams are. Boston the year before, 25, 27, 33. Golden State, when they won it, 26, 31, and 33 were their top 3 minute getters, playoff minute getters during their title run. Same thing if you look at runners-up. The Miami Heat, when they were finalists in the Denver Nuggets year, 25, 33, 36. Dallas, when they were runners-up to Boston, 24, 25, 31. So this idea that it somehow disqualifies Lauri from participating on the next competitive Jazz team just because he might be 29 or 30 or 31 by then is kind of silly. And the thing that I keep saying over and over again is that if the Jazz hit on some of these draft picks, if Ace Bailey turns out to be special, if Walt Clayton turns out to be special, if they draft Darren Peterson or AJ DeBonsa or Cam Boozer, then at that point they're going to go, okay, now we need to go find some veterans who can play and who can score, and we need to find some older people to steady the ship. And at that point in time, they're going to be looking for players exactly effing like Lauri Markkanen.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I'm very happy to have him around, and I do like the idea of kind of purging the roster a little bit so that you have to compete every night because you're not at risk of winning too much. Again, the whole goal is because you don't have a Cooper Flag or Victor Wembanyama at the top, and because there is like a quite great group of talent, but not like a oh shit talent like Cooper Flag or Victor Wembanyama. It makes who cares if you finish sixth worst or if you're drafting sixth. It'd be great if you're drafting first or third, but not at the penalty that this team definitely suffered last year by tanking. The tanking really sucked the soul out of, first of all, I think the development curve of guys like Keontae George and Isaiah Collier. I think it was very, very hard for them to learn what it's like to not dribble off your foot, right? Like that, these sort of things that it was just not a productive environment. So just by sheer nature of competing every night, we're going to get 70 plus games out of Lauri Markkanen just because he'll be active and playing for competitiveness reasons. He's super fun to watch. I wax poetic about Eurobasket. Everyone has it in their brain holes that Lauri Markkanen was this dominant, super amazing force at Eurobasket, and he was, but I'm also pointing out that he shot 30% from three at Eurobasket and looked uncomfortable when he was triple teamed. So a common refrain from last year that I'm going to be paying attention to this year. So, and Andy Larson did ask Lauri Markkanen about like, hey, what skills are you going to try to getting back to? And Lauri gave a platitude-ish answer that isn't worth looking into, but I am curious about Lauri Markkanen's growth curve, like his skill curve and where he's going from here, because once again, he will be asked to be, just like Team Finland, asked to do a lot more than he has traditionally ever had to do.
For sure.
So, do we want to talk about something awkward and negative or something happy and silly?
We just did a Lowry love fest. Let's split it up. Let's spread out our doom and gloom. I assume by awkward and negative, you're referring to the most kind of, what's the meme with the guy sitting forward? Walker Kessler saying that he was frustrated by his by not getting an extension done before the extension deadline for rookie deals.
That's right. I don't think that there was a significantly more negative thing to discuss unless you want to pick apart word choice by, I don't know, Mo Bamba or something. I'm kidding. I don't know. Mo Bamba's interview was fine. But Walker Kessler, he's going to be aware his emotions visibly kind of guy. So I don't want to take when Walker Kessler is not only he said he's frustrated, he's not saying that in a monotone voice. He actually looked pretty despondent that like, hey, just going to get this out there. I am pretty frustrated that an extension didn't get done. But because he is kind of more of an emotional player in interviews and that sort of thing, not aggressively so, but he doesn't hide things too easily. I don't think he was particularly more perturbed than the average person who wouldn't have gotten an extension in that situation. And he was very quick to nip in the bud any sort of conversation about why Austin Ainge wasn't going to talk about it significantly. When Andy asked a follow-up question to Walker of like, hey, just a binary question, Walker, was there a negotiation over the amount, or did Utah not even offer you an extension? And Walker refused to even answer that level of like yes or no binary question. So I certainly want to talk for a little bit now about the virtue of what the Jazz roster building strategy is. You touched upon it earlier about like max cap space. Not that Utah is going to sign LeBron James in free agency next summer, but having max cap space allows you to do a whole lot of things roster building wise than just signing an all NBA player. Like cap space is good for a number of reasons than just signing a player like that. If you look at the history of players in these positions, you give the baby max, as Brian Windhorst calls it, because it's not like the super mega veteran max extension, but any rookie who's worth their salt, if they are an all-star or close to it, or you see the trajectory very obviously going that way, even going down to like a level of like a Franz Wagner, right, who got a baby maximum extension, and even that was like, man, you really gave him the full thing, huh? But Franz
I would have
Wagner,
given Franz Wagner the full max.
I'm sorry?
I love Franz.
Yeah,
I love Franz. I would have given him the max.
I think there was some quibbling about him. I think anyone who's quibbling too hard probably hasn't watched a lot of Orlando Magic. Like, he is on an all-star trajectory. Maybe he'll never make one, But in the right Eastern Conference circumstances, he is going to put up a Gordon Hayward type season that's like, oh yeah, of course he's an all-star. So you just give those guys a max, no question, because that's not a relationship you're fucking around with. Like, that is, thank you for your service, and based on your team building and the salary slots you already have on your roster, you just say, we're giving you this cash. We're going to be a little funny about the other things, like, is it going to be a fifth-year player option or not? Like, some of these other elements of what those extensions look like can be fiddled around with your max quality players. For everyone who's not obviously a max quality players, or even a Franz Wagner, like pretty damn close to it, it doesn't make any sense often for the team to ink that contract early. That does not mean that Utah is going to Gordon Hayward this and go into next summer and force Walker Kessler to go do a parade of the other 29 teams and go solicit restricted free agent offers. That is not what is happening. They're not alienating him in that way that they did with Gordon Hayward. They simply said, tying up our cap sheet now and changing your salary next summer right now does this business no good, and we'll probably have a very productive, happy discussion over how much money we're going to pay you next summer, and you're not even going to touch restricted free agency. We're just not going to do it now. And as a player who wants to get that life-changing 9-figure money, right, it can be very frustrating to hear. But the only way they're going to get that done is if the player is willing to say, look, dude, I really want that. I want those checks right now. Like, I want to guarantee that holy shit money that I've never had before in my entire life. I want that right now. It's going to have to come at like a 40% discount off of what their market value would be. And so you're going to be very far apart on what the market would pay Walker Kessler and what Utah is willing to sacrifice their future flexibility to do. There's no issue with the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it, right? Walker Kessler's cap hold, if he goes into next offseason as a restricted free agent, will be $14.6 million. His cap hold, if the Jazz sign him to a new contract, will be $25 million or $26 million or $22 million or $28 million,
or like $34 million. Like, this could get out of control if they do like a contract. Like, we just saw Josh Giddey getting $25 million. Do you think Walker Kessler's better than Josh Giddey? Well, that cap hold's going to be a little bit higher.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the Jazz will look at, the market value for non-all-star bigs, and they'll say, if it's a Zubac's adjusted for inflation, and Walker's agents will say, bullshit, like, let's, compare, whatever. Like, that's what a negotiation is. My point here is just that whatever that delta is, that's why the Jazz are waiting on this. That's why the Jazz would prefer to wait on this, rather, said another way. And I actually think that fans should be pretty excited about that, because if the Jazz were just approaching this like just another year in a long rebuild, and they're just managing assets that they're going to, at some point in the future, start to parlay into something that means something in a basketball sense, then the smartest thing to do would be to make sure that you have a valuable player like Walker Kessler, who obviously has trade value because every team in the NBA is trying to wish cast him into trades. Not every team, but you get my point. Then you would extend him. You would extend him, and you'd have him under contract, and that would be the smart thing to do from a long-term asset management standpoint, if you didn't have a specific timeline in mind when you wanted to start to accelerate this thing. The fact that the Jazz are focusing on preserving $50 million of cap room next July tells me that there's at least some ideas on what they might do with $50 million in cap room next July. And then they can spend that cap room and use Walker Kessler's bird rights to still sign him to whatever the right number is, because, up to his max salary. So there's the only downside for Kessler here is what you said. He doesn't get the money today. He doesn't get to walk around wearing, gold chains, telling everyone that he's $100 million player for another 9 months of his life.
He's already dating Miss America. What else does he want?
I mean, The rich get richer. What can you say? So anyway, again, I just keep going back to what next offseason could look like. And I think that's actually what the Jazz are signaling by not even the fact that Walker wouldn't even, that he was playing coy about whether or not they even started getting into numbers and offers and, well, we do 2 years, but not 3 years, or we do 3 years, but only if there's a team option, not a player option. The fact that he wouldn't even go there tells me that probably the conversation was short and probably there's an understanding. And that doesn't mean Kessler has to like it, because Kessler probably would rather just put that $100 million in his bank tomorrow. Proverbially, no one actually puts all the money in the bank on the day they sign the contract, but
usually deposit some crypto assets and
sure, yeah. They'll get him a sponsorship deal with Aspire, Aspiration, whatever the hell that thing is
Come on,
called.
get your fake tree planting companies correct.
I know. Get those carbon credits. Walker. So anyway, my point is, I bet that there is some level of an understanding on what they want to do with Walker next summer. And by the way, even if I'm wrong, like, to Jazz fans who are nervous about this, let me just say this for a minute, not to dismiss your concerns. We're all a little bit skittish because the roster has turned over like almost 2 full times in the last 3 years. There are only 2 guys left who were here, like, at this point 3 seasons ago, and that was after a major reconstruction in its own right.
I do think we legitimately pissed off Gordon Hayward. I think that is a legitimate thing that happened.
Sure. So I get the nervousness, but I will also remind people how restricted free agency is working these days. In the new cap environment, with the new rules, go ask Josh Giddey. Josh Giddey did okay for himself. Go ask Josh Kuminga. Go ask Quentin Grimes, who's still not in Sixers camp because they can't come up with a number because Philly has all the leverage and Quentin Grimes knows he's good, but it doesn't matter if one team has all the leverage. If one side of the negotiating table has all the leverage, like, that's what the Jazz are going to head into next season. So if they want Walker Kessler to be part of the long term, Walker Kessler will be part of the long term. And again, I suspect that they've communicated that to him in some combination of words that is, hopefully legal-ish in the construct of collective bargaining. Like, I bet that if there was never an actual offer made, that Walker Kessler at the very least understands why and understands what the Jazz are trying to accomplish. Again, doesn't mean he doesn't have a right to be frustrated by it, or maybe he's not that frustrated, but he knows that it helps them with deniability if he seems frustrated. Who knows? My point is, Walker's a smart guy. He's represented by smart agents who can explain to him the lay of the land, who can help him operate a spreadsheet and see that right now Utah's salary commitments for next season plus Walker Kessler's cap hold add up to $116.5 million about, and that's about $50 million shy of what next year's salary cap will be. That's a huge opportunity for the Jazz to put something next to Kessler and Markkanen and Ace Bailey if he's the real deal, and the 2026 draft pick if that guy's the real deal, and whoever of the other young guys pan out. Like, there's a chance to do something interesting next summer because they asked Walker Kessler to have a little bit of faith in what their thinking is.
Yeah, and I think there's a chance that his frustration is because he doesn't understand it, right? Like, you heard, again, talk about Kevin Love again. He did mention, like, hey, he's kind of been around all over the place. Like, he understands, like, hey, yeah, I'm getting traded to various different places. He was talking about it in the lens of, like, oh, I got traded to Utah. Okay, now what? Like, kind of thinking about what happens there. And when you're a young player like Walker Kessler, and sure, I agree with you about his agents. His agents certainly understand the picture. But if you're Walker Kessler and your entire life you have been catered to as the best basketball player the world has ever seen, and sure, you come into the NBA and you're not the best basketball player the world has ever seen, but you're a Rookie of the Year contender and immediate all-defense contributor. Like, you are obviously super talented and skilled, and you see the numbers, everyone sees the numbers, you know you're good. For the first time hearing you're not quite that special, like, you're going to have to wait for your money. Like, he can be as smart as he wants. That's that's not a fun thing to experience. He doesn't have that 15 years of NBA experience where you're just like, oh, transactions happen, man. Oh well. He's probably rightfully just like, what
Sure.
is this nonsense? I am. Why don't you believe in me like Bruce Pearl did?
I would like to speak to your manager.
Right. So we'll see. I think
Anyway,
he's
I hear you.
he'll be all right. I don't expect that he'll even get to restricted free agency. He's not going to solicit offers, or I don't even think we're going to get to a game of uh, giving him the Kaminga Giddy treatment of like, well, we're going to negotiate down to the last leverage because there's no other team who has cap
Oh,
space.
sure.
I think we're going to give him money like before he even hits it. It's just you
Yeah.
can't structure the contract right now.
I totally I didn't bring up Kuminga and Grimes because I think the Jazz are going into next are going to approach next offseason trying to play hardball. I'm just saying that like in the worst case scenario, the Jazz still control this kid's destiny, which is a good place to be in if you believe in him. But because they believe in him, they also have a vested interest in not pissing him off, like you mentioned with Hayward. Like I think that they will do right by him. Um, and not because they're a nice bunch of dudes. I think they'll do right by him because they believe in him and they think that he'll be helpful to the next good iteration of the Jazz.
Yeah, it's a great point about Hayward because, like, if you think about back when that was all kind of going down, I think you would find a very significant subset of commenters, not just Jazz fans, but like commentators in general, who said, you know, Hayward's kind of on this nice little upward trajectory, but how real is it? Who, like, kind of a late bloomer, awkward skill set, not real clear where like if he's this lights out NBA shooter, if he's an alpha player, or if he's an alpha surefire max player, first banana, or if he's actually like he's had a couple great seasons on these weird Jazz teams, but he's really more of like a fourth guy on a decent team. There was definitely some commentary where if the Jazz didn't actually believe in him, I can see the virtue in saying, go get your contract, buddy, and if you get one, okay, we'll match it and repair the relationship later. But ultimately, they didn't care about their relationship with Gordon Hayward, and it cost them in the long run. Although, you know, things work out the way they work out.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, okay, so we've been going for 50 some odd minutes. So let's get to the part where you excite me even more about Ace Bailey because I know that you've been dying for this portion of the podcast too.
Just like we haven't we've had a few scarce interviews with Ace Bailey. I I was just delighted at his media day interview, and he gives very short answers. I don't think he has like a lot of substance to what he wants to talk about basketball wise or whatever, but he literally couldn't stop smiling. All he wanted to do is just say, I'm ready to play basketball. I'm really excited to be here. And like smiling the entire time. And just, I think he's already kind
Not
of, yeah, go ahead.
not that many guys get to sit up here, he said,
Yeah.
through a sheepish smile. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt you. I was
and I think
trying to
he's
add to your point.
obviously over the summer he's already done a lot of summer workouts with all of the other young guys on the team. There was lots of mention about the Dallas trip that Keontae George led. We might have time to get into. He clearly likes everything that's happened so far in his life, and just full smiles all the time. And I love the comment about that one reporter asked him, do you feel any like additional pressure in this, whatever? And he said, "It's basketball. Put the ball in the hoop. It's basketball." And just like that, as we get into our team previews and projections and player previews, one thing I am kind of raising my eyebrow at that I think this team hasn't had since Chris Dunn is we don't have a lot of fuck you energy on the team, like real nasty energy. I think Kyle Filipowski can maybe get there a little bit this year, and I don't think we've seen like killer attitude Ace Bailey, but I think he provides a different angle towards making a team have different energy, and that is just pure unbridled joy to just like let's work really hard all the time because this is basketball. Let's play a lot of basketball and be fast about it. And that's a different type of that's an angry fuck you energy, but that is more of a joyous like there's no way you're not trying hard tonight, right? Like guys, we're playing basketball. Like it's a different energy booster, spirit lifter kind of player that the Jazz have also not had very much of over the past couple years. And that his interview just solidified it for me that he's heads on right shoulders, he's approaching it the right way. And the Omar Cooper thing is just, I think it's just, it could not have happened better for Jazz fans. Completely tanked his draft situation so that he ends up falling in Utah when he probably should have been a third or at the very worst the fourth pick. Right? I think there is some reasonable debate over the ceilings of VJ Edgecombe versus Ace Bailey, especially over Ace Bailey's kind of up and down Rutgers season. But I can't look at a world where Con Knipple has a higher ceiling than Ace Bailey. That's just not a thing. But Omar Cooper's draft manipulation so that Ace Bailey wasn't even allowed to work out for Charlotte means that Utah has to make a choice. Do we take the obvious superstar talent, or do we take Jeremiah Fears, who's might have some good energy but not Ace Bailey's style? And Omar Cooper, very well documented, not an agent, has been his player manager type ever since like kind of the AAU days. And I don't think there was a better way he could have answered the very first question that was asked to him. Yeah, hey, what happened with Omar Cooper? And he just said, yeah, it was just the right decision for me and my family. And he gives a very quick answer. But he kind of had a small smile as he was saying it, right? Like he was just kind of like, yeah, it was the right decision for me and my family. What's next, guys? And that just shows like there was some thought into this. This wasn't. It was so conclusive that it didn't leave any doubt that he's got some other angle going on. It meant that Omar Cooper definitely was a large presence that needed to be extricated from his life, and he is now GAN gone.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited there. Another one of the interesting things that came out of Austin Ainge's mouth was when he talked about how they view Ace Bailey today, right now, as someone who can play 2 through 4. That's not really something that I kind of had on my bingo card, so that was interesting to hear. I think that flexibility coupled with Markkanen's flexibility positionally and how they use Markkanen makes them a really fascinating kind of duo. If Ace comes into his own quickly enough that they're kind of both relevant together, and then obviously the Jazz have a lot of ways they can add to that duo as well. I think that's an interesting pairing, and a pairing that you could put a lot of different other 3 guys around those two and still construct a meaningful, rational core or group or bunches of different groups. So I was excited. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think one of the takeaways, not even just from listening to Ace Bailey, but just seeing the way the fan base reacted to Ace Bailey's interview. One of the sort of prevailing thoughts is like, yeah, there's no way you can convince me this kid isn't just having the time of his life right now. Utah, New Jersey, Washington, wherever. It's New Jersey. Do you like how I just said New Jersey? Hi, I'm an old guy. I've been around since New Jersey was an NBA city.
He played college ball in New Jersey. That's what you're thinking of.
I know. Okay, that's what I meant. Rutgers. Okay, yeah. So that was, I think, the prevailing takeaway from the Ace Bailey experience on Media Day, and it went beyond anything he said. And like I said, I'm a communications guy, and communications is partly the message as it's delivered and partly the message as it's received. And I think fans were excited. Fans were responding to Ace in a way that was almost as fun to watch as anything he specifically, said or did or, winked while he said it or anything like that. So, still, I think the question of what is his ceiling and how quickly can he start to approach it is maybe the biggest question that determines the Jazz's trajectory over the next half decade. But he definitely did not look to be someone who was like blinking in Morse code, get me out of Utah, which I think the rest of the basketball community was watching for.
Yeah, and compare that to like every single one of Keontae George's interviews over the past few years. Like Keontae George definitely has this like, I'm the best thing since sliced bread attitude kind of all the time. And even Keontae George, just as like a kind of a quick aside, or we can just transition entirely to him. His media day interview, he's getting a lot of credit for like Oh, he led this trip to Dallas and everything like that. But he still is unable to pinpoint, and this is what I want to hear as a fan. He's unable to pinpoint how he knows he can get better as a basketball player. Like you hear Bryce Sensabaugh saying, like, I really gotta not fuck up on defense. I have to be a better defender. I lost 15 pounds. I have to be. I'm gonna be playing smaller. In like we have some forwards. There's some opening at the guard rotation. Like I have to play smaller to get around screens. You didn't say get around screens. You just said I have to be better defensively if I'm gonna last in this league. And I just want to hear Keontae George for once say something that says I haven't done this thing well. Now, he did point
Or
very strongly to the fact that he has not been consistent in his development routines. He has not been consistent in effort, and I think that is notable. That is something that like I'm like, oh, first time we've seen a little bit of self awareness out of Mr. George here. That's pretty cool. And I do like the idea of him helping others enjoy the presence of Utah with that when it's a losing basketball team, starting with this Dallas trip, and hosting a workout and going to a concert and everything. I just want, but he's got this like weird smile on his face the whole time of the interview, like he's too good to be talking to the media or something. Like I don't even know what he's actually thinking, so I'm projecting here to be clear. I just something doesn't feel right. I didn't feel great about that, and I know a lot of fans would disagree with that.
quick aside, Keontae George. So Keontae George doesn't remind me of this person as much as this person reminds me of Keontae George. Occasionally, I watch movies with Anthony Ramos in it. Anthony Ramos, he was in The Heights. He was um, he was in the what's the movie with the guy the they they did the GameStop movie. He was a minor character in the GameStop movie. Um, he's the guy who first took over for Lin-Manuel Miranda as Hamilton on Broadway. Anyway, sometimes I watch Anthony Ramos act and I'm like, dude, that dude reminds me of Keontae George. Anyway, that's a total aside. My point about Keontae George, I think you know that I've had times where I've had a harder time imagining how how we look back in 10 years. I think he'll be in the league for a long time. I think there's enough of a baseline skill set that we're going to be hearing Keontae George's name on whatever the hell network carries the NBA in 10 years. We're going to be hearing his name for a long time. Are we going to be hearing his name as more than like a, Lou Williams off the bench spark plug, next gen Jordan Clarkson, whatever? And that's where sometimes I've been more or less bullish. And I agree with you that like one thing that would be encouraging is to hear him acknowledge where he needs to go next. But even there's another side of self-awareness where it's like, tell me what your NBA skill is. Tell me why you are going to hear your number called today. And that's one thing I liked from Taylor Hendricks. When Taylor Hendricks was asked, what are you working on? He didn't say like, oh, I'm trying to perfect my dribble game. He said, no, I understand that my calling card is defense, and that if I'm on the floor, it's because they want me to defend the other team's best wing or four guy, stretch four. And I think that there's, same thing with Kyle Filipowski. And by the way, is there a better guy to have around as kind of just a model than Kevin Love? If you think about early career Kevin Love, and then you think about what Kyle Filipowski's best case scenario is, that's actually a pretty good fit. And maybe one reason why they're okay keeping him around for a while. But anyway, Kyle Filipowski knows what he needs to get better at to be in the league for 10 years, but he also knows what he can contribute today. And, I want to see Keontae exhibit a better understanding of how he can help a team today. And then, like you said, what does he need to get better at? Because there's a lot of things Keontae needs to get better at. I don't think he is a particularly good game manager, even though like a floor general type point guard. The Jazz hoped when they drafted him that they could kind of shoehorn him into that, the way that the Suns shoehorned Devin Booker into that kind of successfully. I mean, that's not Booker's only role, but when they need him to be, he can be a lead ball handling guard. And I think moving him back to the bench last year might have been a little bit of a concession that they don't that they're less convinced that that's there, and that's okay. But yeah, again, if you're just you know Gen Z Jamal Crawford, then I think, again, you'll be around the NBA for a minute, but that's less interesting to me than if you could really have your ball in the ball in your hands for 50 pick and rolls for a playoff team.
That ends up being a 10 teams in 6 years kind of guy instead of a 6 teams in 10 years kind of guy. And I think that's going to be a key difference for him. Look, my expectations are, we'll get into the Keontae George specific preview at another time, but I'm contrasting his media day interview with, like you said, the Taylor Hendricks, Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, who all identified like, I suck at this thing, or I am expected to do this thing. Basketball has dribbling and passing and shooting and defending and a lot of other things. Like Taylor Hendricks is not dense to the fact that he might need to dribble with his left hand sometimes. Like, of course he worked on dribbling with his left hand occasionally this summer. It's maybe he worked on a couple dribble moves that he can use in a certain situation. Of course Taylor Hendricks worked on that, but it warms my heart when I see a player saying like, I could be an all-star someday, but first I got to shore up the things that make me on the floor so that I can work on that random left-hand dribble move that one time, right, to show something. Yeah. And Keontae George, his maybe this is the start, and also maybe this is the start of it. Maybe him saying for the first time, oh man, I got to be consistent on my effort.
Yeah.
And consistent on my work. That is his first acknowledgement of just like, I can't just like show up and do my 2-hour workout is me shooting around doing nothing for 2 hours. Like, my consistency is going to be, I have a capital W workout that I'm doing today, and I'm going to do the same. Who is most attributed with saying like it's the boring shit day after day after day in the NBA of just like doing the same boring workout day after day after day, but you get better at those specific boring skills, and all of a sudden you're a 22-point per game scorer, which you can be.
Yeah. And by the way, Will Hardy is, I think Will Hardy is equipped mentally to approach guys from a standpoint. I hear Will Hardy talk all the time. And, there's kind of these two schools of thought in coaching. Like, do you look at a guy in terms of like all the habits I need to beat out of him and like, here's how I can shape you into what I want you to be? Or do you approach guys, especially role player level guys, do you approach them from a standpoint of like, what can I get out of you? What are you today? How can you help my team today? And I do think that Will, when I think about Colin Sexton's trajectory in Utah, when I think about how he embraced Lauri, even freaking like how he embraced Jordan Clarkson. Like, Jordan Clarkson was a lot of Jordan Clarkson behaviors are kind of problematic in a Will Hardy basketball system. And yet Will Hardy got here and said, hey, that's okay. I need someone to like do Jordan Clarkson stuff sometimes. So I just think that if Keontae wants to approach his development from a standpoint of like, that like a strengths-based as opposed to a weakness-based development path, I think Will Hardy is the perfect coach to support that and help him solidify what he is. And then, what can he be? I think that's still an open-ended question. I don't mean to sound as though I have decided that he has this ceiling. That's something I try as a rule not to do, is set these imaginary ceilings on guys who are still, 22, 23 years old. But I think, back to your point, it would be comforting to hear him, just describe his trajectory from a place of more self-awareness and again, I like Taylor Hendricks' comments. I'm probably below average high on Keontae George right now among the Jazz, blogosphere, fansphere, whatever. And I'm probably above average bullish on what Taylor Hendricks can still be, although I know it's not going to happen all at once for a guy coming off of that particular injury.
Everything people have said about Taylor Hendricks and his return. I think we can end on this because I think it's a fun, happy, emotional note. If you ever see a teammate get hurt, right, especially catastrophically, so it's going to mean something to people, especially young players and things like that. And I think it is very easy, very, very easy to read between the lines on people's thoughts about Taylor Hendricks and media day when they were all to a T, not just like, oh yeah, he had a really hard road to recovery, we're happy he's back. No, it wasn't that boring. They were effusively ecstatic that dude is back. And emotional. Yeah, Keontae George mentioned like he cried the first time he talked about it in some sort of interview a few weeks back, or however he framed it. As like Keontae George is I think a emotionally great, cool guy too. By the way, I just think it's more about the basketball trajectory for him. I've enjoyed Keontae George the person over the past couple of years. But on Taylor Hendricks, it's the effusive emotional approach that people are so ecstatic that he's back. I think there's two sides to that. One is Taylor Hendricks is someone that everyone really likes having around, and they just love who he is as a person. And you just can't have enough of those guys in the NBA locker room. I'm sorry, if he was a jerk, asshole, whatever, however you want to phrase it, you wouldn't be hearing these comments. No, he's a player people really like having around. And when you're losing 60 games a year, it's really important to have guys like that. Having players like that around. The second part of this is, I think they all look around and they've seen what he's done on the basketball. He's been playing 5-on-5 for a month or so now. They're all kind of looking around, and I know everyone says we're getting the platitude talk, of course. Austin Ainge said he was a monster, but I do think that based on people's vibes about what they've seen from Taylor Hendricks is like, oh, he is immediately a problem. He is, and I'm super, super duper high on him. I think this is over 2 blocks a game. I think this is over 1.3 steals per game. I think this is going to be, you can't keep him off the floor because makes every lineup 7 points better per 100 possessions better defensively. He's gonna
and doesn't need the ball.
He doesn't need the ball, and apparently he'll be probably pretty happy otherwise. I'm super happy for him, and his personality is shining right through as opposed to his rookie season, and I'm delighted for him. I'm happy he's back. Don't get hurt, please.
Well, yeah, seriously. It's funny, the Jazz have a lot of data on like re-injury rates, and I think one of the things they really believe with these, ACLs and Achilles and leg injuries is that if you can get a guy through his first season after injury, then your re-injury rates basically go back to being equal as though you'd never had the injury in the first place. So I'm sure that there will be times when they'll kind of want to bubble wrap him just, out of precaution. They're going to want to get him to the year, get him through this full season without any incidents. And that's probably the right thing to do, but I'm just excited to see him on the court. And I think, in general, again, we've talked a lot about Lauri's future, Kessler's contract situation for next summer, how good will Ace Bailey be and when, but I think, that really is kind of the next most important topic for the Jazz. And I'm sure that's something we'll delve into as we get into full player preview mode. It's just like, how many of these other 7 young guys, so it's Hendricks, it's Williams, it's Keontae George, Walt Clayton, Flip, Sensa, Buck Collier, how many of them have a credible future as like top 7, top 8 guys in a playoff rotation? That I think is where we go next with this analysis. We won't do that tonight because we've been keeping these nice people entertained for well over an hour now. Is there anything else you want to hit on before we wrap this baby up and get excited for the next round of player analysis?
No, I think what people should look forward to coming out of Salt City Hoops coming up and is of course our player previews. One thing that I think is going to be very fun that we did last year that we're going to do this year is when we talk about each individual player on the 15-man roster. One of my favorite questions is, what lineup are you excited to see with this particular player? And for damn near every player on this roster, I am envisioning a 5-man lineup with that particular player, and I can't wait to come up with the different combinations, especially as you said with Austin Ainge mentioning that Ace Bailey is a credible too. Oh man, now we're going to have some fun. So keep an eye out for our player previews, but if you want to really think about like how this team is actually going to look on the court, I think we're the people you want to listen to.
Sounds great. Well, that's a better teaser than I could come up with, so let's just leave it right there. Mark Pereira is over there in Denver, Colorado. practicing law, nerding out about the Jazz, being mad about Kawhi Leonard. And he is a writer for Salt City Hoops. We're lucky to have him. Writer, podcaster for Salt City Hoops. I'm Dan Clayton, the managing editor of Salt City Hoops. We're going to have a lot more coming your way as this fun telling season gets underway. So thanks for listening. We'll be back soon at the Salt City Hoops podcast.